For all its beauty and splendor, the wilderness can be a cruel teacher. Yellowstone gives beauty without measure. Geysers that erupt like clockwork, waterfalls that thunder through canyons, bison that roam the valleys as they have for centuries. But behind that beauty lies the brutal truth. If you come here and don't respect this place, it'll take you. It won't just take your life, it will take all of you. The boiling pools will strip you down to nothing. Nobody to recover, no grave to mark, no ashes to scatter. Here, the earth can swallow you whole, and there will be nothing left of you at all. Let's venture back to the savage wilderness where survival is earned, not given. This is Outdoor Disasters. For Colin Scott, his Yellowstone visit would be a horror. 22-year-old Colin Nathaniel Scott, a young man from Portland with the restless air of someone standing at the edge of life's next chapter. He had recently graduated college, the kind of milestone that leaves a person searching for freedom before the weight of jobs, schedules, and expectations sets in. Yellowstone, with its steaming earth and boundless sky, seemed like the right place for that search. He wasn't alone. His sister, Sable Scott, traveled with him. They were close, the kind of siblings who laughed easily and leaned on each other. Together they had made the trip into Wyoming, driving into the park where mountains crowd the horizon and bison move like ancient shadows across the meadows. They came as tourists but also as adventurers, drawn to experiences not everyone would dare. On that June afternoon, the air was warm and alive with the smell of sulfur. Tourists filled the boardwalks at Norris Geyser Basin, marveling at the sight of steam plumes and boiling pools. But Colin and Sable were after something else. There's an outlaw allure to the idea of slipping into a hot spring, of finding a hidden pool far from the crowds and soaking in water warmed by the earth itself. Locals call it hot potting, and though the rules of the park forbid it, stories circulate all the same. To Colin and Sable, it must have seemed harmless. The basin stretched out, white crust and rainbow pools, dotted with warning signs that they had seen but set aside. Perhaps they thought a quick soak would make a good story. Perhaps they trusted their youth to shield them. So they stepped off the wooden path. Two figures walking into forbidden ground, leaving behind the safety of the planks and the watchful eyes of the crowd. Every step they took carried them deeper into a landscape that looks solid but is not. The crust beneath their shoes was a thin shell of minerals, brittle as porcelain spread over a furnace of boiling water. A mistake here could not be undone. Yet the world was quiet. The pool shimmered, the air hissed with steam, and for Colin and his sister, it must have felt like discovery. A secret, theirs alone. But what they didn't know was that the ground beneath them was only pretending to be solid. A horror was waiting for them, a sudden, merciless disaster that would burn itself into the park's dark history. Something so dreadful it would be remembered not for its beauty, but for the screams that echoed across the basin. The world's first national park, Yellowstone. Set in the northwestern corner of Wyoming, this is a place that feels less like land and more like legend. Each year, millions of people from every corner of the globe make the pilgrimage here, stepping into a realm that seems almost magical. They come for the landscapes, towering mountains, sweeping valleys, and meadows that blaze with wildflowers in summer. They come for the wildlife where bison roam in herds across the plains, bears patrol the forests, and wolves prowl the river valleys. They come for the water too. Rivers that carve deep canyons, waterfalls that plunge in white fury, and lakes so vast they mirror the sky. But above all, they come for the fire beneath the earth. Yellowstone's geothermal basins are unlike anywhere else on the planet. Pools glow in impossible shades of blue, orange, and green, their surfaces bubbling with heat that has traveled from miles underground. Geysers erupt with sudden fury, launching columns of water into the sky. At times, massive eruptions thunder like bombs, rattling the earth, shredding the quiet, and sending geysers of steam and rock into the sky. A brutal reminder that this place is not merely beautiful, but actively lethal. Steam vents hiss from the ground as if the land itself is alive. These otherworldly sights capture the imagination of all who enter, a reminder that Yellowstone is not just a park, it is a window into the restless heart of the earth. Within this park, the Norris Geyser Basin sits in the center of Yellowstone. It is the hottest, most changeable of the park's thermal areas. Walkways stretch across the barren land, planks laid over boiling earth. The signs tell the story bluntly. Danger. Stay on the boardwalk. Scalding water. Fragile ground. Few stop to read them for more than a glance. The water isn't just hot, it is furious. Pools here reach temperatures of 200 or 93 degrees Celsius and higher, some laced with acid strong enough to eat flesh. Rangers know the basin well. They speak of it with a kind of awe, calling it the most volatile corner of Yellowstone. It shifts daily, vents appearing and vanishing, the ground heaving and settling in silence. What looks solid can be hollow. What looks calm can erupt without warning. Visitors wander through with cameras raised, chasing the colors, the steam, the alien silence. It is beautiful. But beauty here is a trap. The same mineral crust that paints the pools in turquoise and gold is as brittle as glass. Step off the path and the chances of disaster here are high. Colin and Sable Scott had walked past the warning signs, looking for a rush of adventure. They were intrigued by hot potting. Hot potting at Yellowstone is when people sneak into the thermal areas and try to soak or swim in the hot springs. The name sounds fun and harmless, like sitting in a natural hot tub, but at Yellowstone, it's one of the most dangerous and foolish things you can do. When they stepped 200 yards off the boardwalk into the ground on Norris Basin, it looked firm, but was nothing more than a thin veneer of minerals over boiling earth. Beneath their feet, the crust cracked and shifted, the smell of sulfur burning their lungs. Around them, the pools glowed, beautiful as gemstones, deadly as acid. They found a small pool, about 6 feet across and 10 feet deep. Its surface shimmered, the water clear, blue, deceptively calm. Sable raised her phone to capture the moment. Colin crouched at the edge, curious, perhaps amused, reaching out to test the heat. Then the crust betrayed him. Gravel shifted. His weight pressed against a rim of mineral too weak to hold. It gave way. He slid forward with no time to catch himself. There was a splash like oil thrown on fire, followed by a sound no one forgets. The violent hiss of flesh meeting boiling acid. Colin screamed. The water engulfed him to the chest, then over his head. His arms thrashed wildly, breaking the surface, skin already blistering and peeling in the scalding 212-degree water. His voice cracked and choked as the basin filled his mouth. Sable dropped to her knees, screaming his name, reaching with one arm, as if she could drag him out. But the heat pushed her back. The air above the pool was searing, a scalding vapor rising from the surface. She could see his face, contorted in pain, turning red, raw, eyes wide. A crucifix necklace floated against his skin as the water boiled around him. Seconds stretched into eternity. The sound of his cries faded, swallowed by steam and bubbling water. Then his movement slowed. His body turned, face up, floating briefly on the surface. The skin on his arms sloughed off in sheets. His sister's phone shook in her hands as she recorded it, her voice breaking in sobs, pleading for him to hold on. But Yellowstone does not give second chances. The heat and acid worked quickly. His body convulsed, then stilled, sinking back into the pool. Only ripples remained, the surface swallowing him whole. The smell of burning flesh lingered in the air. Sable knew she couldn't save him. There was no cell service, no rope, and no ranger nearby. The water itself was a weapon, the earth an accomplice. She turned and ran, sobbing, desperate for help, leaving behind the boiling pool that had claimed her brother in less than a minute. By the time rangers reached Norris Basin, the storm was rolling in. Dark clouds pressed low and thunder cracked against the mountains. The air was heavy with rain and sulfur. They hurried across the boardwalk, flashlights cutting through steam. At the pool, they saw him. Colin floated face up in the water, his upper body visible through the rising steam. His skin was already raw, the surface of his arms peeling in strips, his chest mottled red and white. The necklace, a small crucifix, rested against his face, bobbing with each ripple. The water hissed around him, a cauldron alive with heat and acid. The rangers took in the scene quickly. The temperature measured near boiling, 212 or 100 degrees Celsius. The pool itself was highly acidic, capable of dissolving flesh and bone, and the ground around the rim was unstable. One wrong step and they too could be swallowed. Still, they began to plan a recovery, knowing the family would want something to bury, anything at all. Then lightning split the sky. The storm was too close. To continue would risk more lives. The commander gave the order, retreat. They marked the site, recorded their observations, and then pulled back into the storm. It was a bitter decision, but necessary. By dawn, the storm had passed. Rangers returned to the pool with ropes and poles, ready to attempt the grim work. But when they reached the site, the water was empty. The surface shimmered blue and calm, the steam rising as if nothing had happened. The body was gone. What the rangers feared had come true. Overnight, the scalding, acidic water had consumed him. Nothing remained to recover. They found only fragments: a wallet, sodden and warped, and a pair of flip-flops lying near the rim. That was all. No body to carry out, no remains to return to the family, just objects, pitiful in their ordinariness, left behind after the earth itself had taken him. By the next morning, the pool at Norris looked as if nothing had happened. The surface was calm, the steam rising in soft ribbons. But beyond the basin, the story could not be contained. News spread quickly. The headlines were blunt: "Man dissolved in Yellowstone hot spring." The word struck like a blow, sparking fascination and horror in equal measure. A death so strange, so final, it seemed unreal. The National Park Service compiled its report, 60 pages of interviews, measurements, and grim details. The report was released months later under a Freedom of Information Act request. The video Sable had recorded of the fall, the thrashing, her screams, was withheld. Too graphic, too personal. When the details became public, people recoiled. Some wept for the young man, imagining his final moments. Others mocked him online, calling it stupidity, a Darwin Award. Yellowstone officials tried to cut through the noise with a single message: "This is why we post signs. This is why we say stay on the boardwalk." Park spokeswoman Jody Lyle told reporters, "This is a tragic reminder of the importance of following regulations in our thermal areas." She repeated what rangers already knew: hot springs have injured or killed more people in Yellowstone than bears, bison, or cliffs. The summer of 2016 had already been plagued by incidents. Tourists putting a bison calf in their car, others walking out on the fragile crust of Grand Prismatic Spring. Colin Scott's death became the darkest of them all. For the park, it was not just a fatality, it was a symbol, a story they would use for years to come as a warning. There were no charges, no lawsuits, no fines. His sister was not cited, though she had walked with him off trail. The law had already passed its judgment in the most absolute way. The rangers called their recovery attempt futility. The press called it dissolved. And so the incident lived on, not in a grave or a memorial, but in words, in warnings, in the cautionary tales told by rangers to tourists who leaned too close to the pools. Colin Scott's death was not the first, and it will not be the last. More than 20 people have slipped, fallen, or leapt into Yellowstone's thermal waters over the past century. Some were children who wandered too close. Some were men chasing pets. Some were dreamers like Colin, looking for something more than a view from a boardwalk. And now, his death has become part of the park's lore. Colin's story is told now not to shame him, nor to sensationalize his death, but to remind us that wild places are still wild. They ask for humility, they demand caution, they deserve reverence. Tragedy lies not only in the act, but in the temptation. Hot springs are beautiful. They glow with colors that look painted by gods, their water so clear they seem harmless. They invite you closer, whispering of warmth, of adventure, of a secret the signs are keeping from you. But the secret is death. To step past the warning is to gamble against time and geology, and in Yellowstone, the house always wins. The wild does not play games. It does not make deals. It does not care about your confidence, and it will not forgive your mistakes. Out here, if you walk in without respect, the consequences are final. There are no second chances when you fall into boiling water, step onto a thin crust, or test a place that has claimed lives for over a century. That's why the Park Service posts signs and builds boardwalks. Not to spoil your adventure, but to keep you alive. When they say stay on the path, they mean it. When they say don't touch the water, they mean it. These rules aren't suggestions. They're the only thing between you and a tragedy. And here's the truth. You don't want to be the next headline. You don't want your family reading about you in the papers. And you definitely don't want to end up on the Tourons of Yellowstone Instagram page or a future story on this channel, remembered for doing something reckless and foolish. And maybe that is the final lesson, that the earth is older than us, stronger than us, and far less merciful. We can visit, we can look, we can marvel. But we cannot forget the truth beneath the colors. That beauty here is bound to danger, and one misstep can mean everything. Respect the park, respect the warnings, respect the wild. Because if you don't, you'll be the next person featured on Outdoor Disasters. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more Outdoor Disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.